And we have one recommendation that we're going to need to consider, the GMP for the Empower College and Career Center. Is everyone ready to vote on that, or is there questions or discussion?
Lynn, it wouldn't be a meeting if I didn't have questions.
Well, that's the reason I said none. Do we have any?
I was typing. That's why I was late coming on. I was typing and I sent a couple of questions out. Ted, I don't know if you got any of those yet. I can repeat them.
Just looking at it right. Just going to open right now. Yeah, your first question. I just added a revised attachment. I had a typo on there that I had not included. I had 2 X's in the blanks for
Right.
contingency. There's a 10% contingency in the Carroll Daniel GMP, and there's a 3% for the owner.
Okay, that 10% is that your contingency that you control, or they totally control that 10%?
It's a contingency that in our projects thus far we control together. They don't do anything in the use of contingency without us and our approval. But I believe it's important that the CM carry a contingency for things that they need as well. That's why I tend to put another contingency purely on the owner side that would cover things like scope of work changes or things that we have in mind. But we typically use up the CM's contingency first.
Okay. You have, I can't find my question
I'm looking at, I want to know, let's see, what's being done this summer.
Yeah.
And what has to be over the summer and how much will it cost? The majority of the dollars in the GMP go to what's known as the D wing, which is the cafeteria, kitchen, and old gym. And in the recommendation, you'll see that that's the phase 1 work. It will not all be completed this summer. Our goal this summer is to ensure that the cafeteria and kitchen are ready to go should we begin on-site school July 31. So that one is, that's the absolutely have to finish that part of it.
Okay.
And we have worked with Mr. Wester and his team to talk about what we do for ROTC, what we do for distance learning they had planned to use in one of the labs there, and adaptive PE. And if everything goes beautifully and we get some of that space open and finished and certificate of occupancy, we could move in, but he's anticipating that he'll need to do something a little bit different. He mean Mr. Wester for a period of time. But the majority of the dollars are aimed towards the D wing construction. That's really the big scope of work for Empower. It includes the advanced engineering lab. It includes logistics lab. Those are big ones. Classrooms, nurses aid, laboratory, and a health science laboratory, as well as a students commons area that connects with the cafeteria. It, of course, also, as I said, includes the cafeteria, which will be completely renovated, and the existing concessions becomes a coffee shop or a marketing area that goes with that program. The remaining work, which we've deemed as phase 2, is also described in the board recommendation, and those are the other programs that are fitting into existing spaces for the most part on the project. The one that'll have the most work is the construction carpentry lab, and that we are enlarging an area to hit the minimum size for that, and we're adding outdoor storage. So that gets a fairly big chunk, which is labeled as phase 2 allowance in the GMP. And that's what the total would include. We will not get all of that done this summer, but that work is getting ready for the August 2021 opening.
So how much do you think, I can, if you tell me kind of what you think estimate wise, it helps me relate a little bit. So how much this summer you're thinking, 20% of this 5.2 million you'll spend just in the cafeteria and the kitchen, or a little more?
And more.
I would say we'll spend more of that in the D wing.
Okay.
I would say it would be approaching 70% or so for that total area.
Okay. D wing,
but-
cafeteria, kitchen, 70% roughly.
Yeah, Josh, do you have a better number on that? I'm looking right now to see if I have one that I could pull something out of.
Well, I think if we look at the GMP and take the allowances out for the phase 2,
Yeah,
I mean, everything else on there is the D wing. And then if I had to break that down, I'd say the old gym portion would be about 70 to 80% of that.
Okay.
And area would be about 20% of what's left. So if we took the top, that 3.7 million, and then just broke it down that way, I think that would give us pretty close to what would be completed this summer.
So when school comes back in the fall, I know it's subject to change, but I'm just assuming it does. School comes back in the fall, what work is still going to go on site while kids and staff and everybody's in the building?
great question. If you were walking down the corridor directly into the cafeteria to your left in the D wing, the old gym area, we call it, that will be continuing on through the year.
Okay.
Our hope is that the outside work that's in the core yard between C and D and between the auditorium and the D wing and the backside of D wing, mainly that area is some storm drainage, some concrete work, some landscaping work, fire line work. All of that I believe will be this summer and will be back in shape for students, so it won't impact students in the fall. The other work, this list is phase 2, would of course go on during the school year, and would have to schedule that during appropriate breaks or times that make sense with the school so we don't disrupt too much.
And then next summer, is that you'll finish it up and that'll be final equipment and things like that?
Yeah, next summer would be obviously the time to get ready and be open for Empower in August. And I kind of back up. The work we do this summer throughout the school obviously can't disrupt existing classes. So if we can relocate and make a few changes along the way, we could potentially do the construction lab during the year or some other spaces. But a lot of that work still will be the following summer.
Okay. Is there any chance you could email me afterwards that little floor plan? Maybe I can ask more questions offline.
The full floor plan or the D wing?
One of each. The big plan. I'm not as
Sure.
My knowledge of the building is either going to a classroom or taking a kid around or something.
Gotcha.
So I don't have some of these wings totally memorized in places that you guys do. So an overall little floor plan would help, and then this other stuff. And then one other question: we spoke back earlier in the year when Miss Wheeler and I met with you guys. The old gym is used by ROTC, and then there are some other special uses. So we have space still allocated and ready to use for those folks. That's still good?
It is. Josh, you want to answer any of that? You've been working with the ROTC guys.
As soon as that space is finished, ROTC will move into it until Empower starts up.
Okay.
We don't have a concrete space for them yet. We're looking at trailers. We're looking at some other spaces that may be available for a month or so. Of course, once we figure out what the first day of school looks like, we can figure get a better idea of where we put them. We've moved all of their storage, everything storage wise. They've got space now in the old EV building. So all that's done. We're just looking for the classroom space we haven't nailed down yet until those labs are finished.
Okay.
And Mr. Wester's going to move PE, using the old gym into the new gym. And he's working on a plan for the adaptive PE. And the other was distance learning, and we can put them in potentially in a portable or another space. It was just a spot where we would set up tables for kids to come in and do computer work.
Okay. If I could get those floor plans, and then that'd be great. That'd help me. And then I've got a few more questions I can ask you online. It's kind of like what's going on, what's this kind of thing.
Sure.
We need to get going it. And then the other thing, I'd just like to, if there's a way we could get any kind of update, April, as this project goes, just to help confirm. I'm just concerned about school starting on time, and there's just a lot to do. So if there's any way, every few weeks, if somebody could just email me and just tell me it's still going as planned or something, if that's okay.
Absolutely. I think that's a very fair request. And part of what I wanted us to discuss this morning before we go into executive session, honestly, is just making you aware of some of the things that we are researching and planning. First of all, as you know, I do meet weekly with all the regional superintendents, and there's a significant effort for us to at least we don't have to all do everything the same, but we're trying to be somewhat aligned so that we're adhering to the guidance that CDC has provided, but also doing the very best that we can by kids. Some of you who are parents may know that we sent out a survey to parents asking, given an option, not because we want to create too much choice, but because we just feel like to get some insight from parents will help us plan more efficiently. So we sent the survey out. Right now, I looked at it late last night. We have a little over 300 responses, which is just a very small sampling. So we'll keep pushing that out. But the vast number of responses that we see, about 40% of the parents would prefer, no matter what, to send their kids back to school. About 45% would prefer to send their kids back to school, but understand if we have to go to online. Less than 5% right now would prefer to keep their children in an online setting. So that's the preliminary data that we have. So for us, we're trying to prepare for a startup. And I'll share with you, in fact, I don't mind sharing it right now. This is and since Mike is with us, Buffington, this is very preliminary. But in looking at what people are doing across not just our region, but even across over into South Carolina, Tennessee, and areas around us, and that have had similar responses to the COVID outbreak, some of the most powerful teaching time really is likely to be September, October, November. I'm thinking that December, January is really likely to be a time that we may struggle again once the flu season kicks up and we have sickness coming through. So I'm sharing with you on the screen a potential modified version of a calendar. Now, our principals have not even seen this, so we'll share this with them today, and they may kick us down the curve. But our thinking is that if we use that October break, so if you look right here, if you're looking at my screen, the 12th through the 16th was originally a break, a fall break, and we just feel like that's probably going to be prime time for learning, that we probably don't need to take that break and push that break back into January. This year, we saw the highest incidence of sickness in that right in the dead of that time frame. And plus, as we all know, if you think about families getting together and spread and so forth, the holidays escalate sickness. It just seems to be the way it is. So our thinking was, let's take that break and extend the Christmas break when we are likely to have more illness, and then not bring kids back until like January the 12th. And then you can see here, there's a purple box that we've put around, And we just go ahead and plan for that is a potential need for remote learning if we have another pandemic outbreak. So we've tried to build more breaks, and when we expect for there to be a greater incidence of sicknesses, and then also just preparing parents that depending upon how this particular pandemic comes back, and if it does at all, we have no way of knowing, but if it does, that would likely be the time. So this is something that we're going to share with our principals during our principals meeting today, just to get their feedback. Quite frankly, I just want you to know that I am very genuine in saying that our district is doing an amazing job with remote learning, especially relatively compared to others. We've tried so hard to make sure that, I'll tell you, we're wearing our teachers slap out. I mean, because our teachers are really staying engaged, and they're trying to individualize and meet with each kid, and they're certainly not working like 7:30 to 3:30. They're working all day, every day. And so I'm very grateful for that. I can't tell you right now what my recommendation would be in terms of startup. If I went on my heart, it would be, let's get our kids back in school and deal with families who are concerned by exception. But I don't think that is probably going to be feasible based on the guidelines. Most of us tried to tune into a webinar yesterday through the CDC, and then I read over it last night. Some of the strong suggestions: keep student desks 6 feet apart. Well, if you keep student desks 6 feet apart in a 550 square foot room, you can only get about 8 kids in a room. Well, we got 25 kids assigned to classrooms, so we'd have to break them into thirds and figure out if we want to bring them every third day. The other dynamic is on a school bus. David and I talked, and we thought we might be able to get about 22 kids on a bus. The recommendation is 11. So 11 students on a school bus. Right now, we put somewhere between 35 and 65, depending on the route. So that means that you would times 3 the number of routes. So there are so many variables that we have to sort through. And this is not a complaint. This is just helping you to, and I know that you understand, but we're trying to work with our entire region to address some limitations that are really beyond our control. So the silver lining is we have a robust, strong remote learning platform in place, and our kids and our families are responding to the best of their ability. It is not ideal, but our feeling is pretty strong that some access and engagement to learning is better than no access or engagement in learning. So if we can't start the way our regular calendar is, then we'll start remotely on time, and we may delay the presence of students. Some districts around us are looking at waiting until after Labor Day. Gwinnett County has put out a tentative calendar that starts on September the 8th, which is after Labor Day, and goes through June the 16th with very few breaks. I welcome your feedback, and we're going to ask for the principal's feedback. To me, we already have students who have been away from school for 12 weeks, what will have been 12 weeks. And if we add another month that they're not engaged, we really risk some pretty significant loss that just compounds. So our feeling from a district leadership perspective is, let's get them started on something. And then if we can't bring them back till after Labor Day, that's fine, but let's at least provide some remote learning resources and try to get that going. So that's where we are. As you, I hope, are fully aware, most of us are in and out, and I'm here pretty full time now. And the bus shop is here working on buses. We are working on getting plexiglass in our front offices to protect our front office folks. We're working on providing all of the biochemicals for cleaning. Josh's team is doing amazing work. All of our custodians are back full time, and they are cleaning and disinfecting. So we've got plans in place, and we continue to work on that. There are just so many variables right now that are to be determined. So our goal is to be able to make a decision, in the next two or 3 weeks. And we're going to bring that to you at the June board meeting, but we're trying hard to just continue to evaluate what the numbers look like and what resources are available, and then how others around the region are responding to this. So I welcome your thoughts, your feedback, any questions or comments you have. Please know that we we all, and I'm sure you do as well, spend a lot of time sorting through, reading, and trying to come up with the right solution. But right now, I don't know that there is a right solution yet. Staff or board members, any thoughts, questions, feedback were welcomed.
Well, my comment would be, just to throw it in there, is that the greater clarification we get from federal and state will help us a lot. We have a good plan, but as Dr. Howard said just yesterday, we got, or the day before this, the 60-page CDC guidelines. So, do we adhere to that or not is kind of the question. And I hope, I think there's a governor's briefing this afternoon late, which always helps to have that new information. So as we kind of funnel those guidelines down to what we really need to do, it would be helpful. And if it doesn't, then we're prepared as well. Mr. Cronick.
Yeah, I think it may be the end of June before we know anything from the state as to what they allow us to do, so to speak, and when we can go back and what we get from them. So I don't know. I understand there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of wait and see and following what this virus actually does when the weather starts to heat up. I'm thinking it should slow down, but who knows? But
there's a lot of unknowns with this.
A lot of unknowns, absolutely.
April, can I ask if you're going to get some feedback from the principals on this today? If they were to say they were okay with this, would you put it back out for public comment, or would we just wait to hear from the state and then this would be our calendar, we would think, or what could we expect from a timeline standpoint?
I think what the governor we hear from the principals this afternoon. We hear if the governor gives us any additional updates today. We give this existing survey that we presently have a few more days. And I would say that what I'd like to do is the first week of June, by the time we are ready to meet with you, is be able to take the feedback that we get from parents in the next week and a half, and then potentially put this calendar back out and be able to bring you some results by the June work session and board meeting to couple this potential calendar with the feedback that they've provided us. And again, we may be in a position, by the June board meeting, which is just, 2 weeks away, but, it's amazing how quickly things are changing. We can at least make a recommendation at that point based on the data that we're able to collect in those two venues. So, and, I know that you all have busy lives and are very engaged in other things, but please don't hesitate at any given time. You guys can call a board meeting if you want an update, and I serve at your pleasure. So if there's some things that you learn or that you want to know about, we can have a board. As you can see, it's easy. We can pull together as long as we give 24 hours notice and let our legal organ know. We can have a board meeting at any time. And there are boards that are meeting on a weekly basis in our region just because they're trying to stay abreast of what's going on. This is unique and it's tough. And you guys have a lot of constituents who are asking a lot of questions, and rightfully so. So we're trying to keep them very informed. I'm sending an email and posting on Infinite Campus portal pretty regularly, but it's a difficult position for you, I know. So we'll do whatever you would like to do.
Yeah. There's a lot of phone calls, a lot of questions right now. So
yeah, I just have a general. This kind of relates to this calendar, but in generally speaking, I get asked about athletics, about fall athletics a lot, and is it reasonable to say or to think? Well, first, let me just say, if you had that discussion with folks in the region about fall sports, if there is some change to everybody's school calendar.
Yes, sir. Tuesday, we had a regional meeting, and Robin Hines, who's the director of executive director of GHSA now, spent about an hour with us. And he gave us a kind of a sneak peek into what the GHSA guidance will be when it comes out next. It's supposed to come out Friday or Tuesday of next week. And so I'm happy to send that to you. But in a nutshell, GHSA is going to allow for June 1st, conditioning only, no equipment, no balls, and no more than 10 athletes at a time unless they're outdoors, and then they can do 20 athletes at a time, and that has to include coaches. So if there's 2 coaches, then there's only 18 students, and the same 2 coaches have to work with the same 18 student athletes. They're not going to cross over, and they have to be staggered by 15 minutes. And they have to clean equipment between every group of students that come through. There's guidance on cleaning weight equipment if part of the conditioning includes the weight room. So there's specific guidance on that. And they are putting out about a 20-page document on what the expectations are. And that is only for the month of June for conditioning purposes only. So there's not supposed to be any strategy or playbook type practices. It's just for conditioning. Now, that's great guidance, and we're grateful for it. Monitoring that is going to be a unique dynamic, and we'll do the best that we can, but we're not going to drive around and be the GHSA police. There's just no way. We're expecting people to act as professionals and do as we've been asked to do. I will tell you, I've gotten some community feedback because the recreational department opened up parks this week. And I think Mr. Sanders' intent was for leisure purposes. I don't know. I haven't been able to talk with Ricky this week, but there are some rec teams that are starting to practice, and we need to be real clear honestly, we need to be very clear from a Board of Education perspective that GHSA considers schools to be closed. We do not open until June the 1st, and then we follow the guidelines, because I worry that there's, we just don't want to do anything we're not supposed to do and jeopardize any potential for competitiveness. But right now, there is an absolute that there's no between schools competitions, no scrimmages, no 7-on-7s, nothing like that can take place. And Dr. Hines said that he expected to give some additional follow-up in the latter part of June as to what they were going to allow to happen in July. Right now, nobody is adjusting schedules or calendars in terms of athletics events, because I think folks somewhat feel that there's a potential for there just not to be a season, and there's not right now an opportunity there's no sense in spending time on that. One question came up actually from one of our ADs, which was a great question, is there been any consideration for changing seasons for less contact sports to be in the fall? For example, move baseball to the fall and move football to the spring, and because those are lower contact sports. And Dr. Hines actually said that has been considered, but that there's no decision on that. And then the other piece that's interesting is there's many districts, including Gwinnett, who's doing things like cheerleading tryouts virtually. So kids are doing some virtual tryouts, and we're going to get some guidance on some potential for virtual tryouts. And Mr. Hayes and Mr. Lindsay were part of that. They both joined me on the conference call. I invited them, so they're in the loop on all this as well. So that's all we know at this point. It's hard to say, and Dr. Hines wouldn't give us any indication, and I don't blame the man. I mean, he's in the same position all of us are. He said, here's what I can tell you now for the month of June, and this is the best I got. And so that's where we are.
Well, I'll just share kind of my quick thought on some of this. If we don't think it's safe to open a school August the 5th, I don't see how we can expect kids and teens and everybody to prepare for a fall season if we don't think it's safe to open. That's kind of where I was going with it. So if we don't open till September, and we're doing that because we don't think it's safe, then we don't need a football team out there tackling each other 4 weeks or playing games or doing whatever. That's just my opinion. So
I agree, Don.
Sure. Yeah.
Appreciate you sharing that. One thing that I clearly am not a very athletic person. So, but I do love athletics. And I watched an interview with Kevin Maloof, who's, as you know, a 25-year head coach in Gwinnett County. And he was talking about his concern being that if you can't make sure kids are conditioned, it's not only about the virus, it's also the risk to injury if kids are not prepared. And that's another element I think we had to be very conscientious of, is that if they're not conditioned, we can't throw them out there to compete and risk injury for kids who haven't had a fair chance to prepare. So I think we're just like everything else right now, we're going to have to pay close attention to what comes from the governor and respond in a nimble way, just like everybody has. But right now, student and quite frankly, staff health is most important in this whole conversation. And I know you all are business owners and leaders and understand this, but Dr. Blankenship is with us, and Ted and Josh, and we've all talked a great deal about certainly our first concern is our students and our families that we serve, but there's a significant concern for our staff members. And there's some data out there that, the percent of our staff members, not just Jackson County, but in education generally speaking, there's a large percent of those folks who have many of those pre-existing conditions that, if a third of our teaching staff or leaders, staff is not safe to return, that impacts everything as well. So you've got to consider all of those various dynamics. So, and just like you, we're trying to do that thoughtfully and balancing what we need to do. I wouldn't want to be the governor or the president right now. It's a very, you just really can't make exactly the right decision because this is the first of many different experiences. So I am so grateful for your questions, though, because every question that people in the community ask helps us think of something that we may not have thought of. And we're trying really hard to think of everything. And I'll tell you, ciphering through the amount of guidance that we get. Like Ted said, I read through that 60-page document last night from the CDC, and we get things from, and again, very grateful for all of the information and the guidance. But like anything, it's a little overwhelming because you just trying to manage it and do the right thing for kids. So
Can I
that's
ask,
where we are. Yes,
can I
sir.
ask a question about
Please.
facilities and
Please.
the CDC thing?
Sure.
How's that when we open back up? Is that going to have any impact on the use of facilities that we rent out, to churches or to other organizations to use our facilities? How do you anticipate that to impact that at all?
I do. And, Ted and Josh are welcome to, from my perspective, I think from a taxpayer and stakeholder perspective, the first service model has to be to the students and to our staff members. And it's not that our community is second, but every time someone from the general public enters our school, there's an increased risk. So I think we have to be very, very conservative and get our kids back in the school and make sure we feel comfortable with our disinfectant models and things before we allow any outsiders to use the schools. Josh, Ed?
I would agree. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. We've got some pretty stringent cleaning practices in place that, and once school starts back, those are, we'll make sure those are followed. And for somebody else using our buildings, it's just impossible to know. They've got to be able to follow the same procedures we put in place as far as checking people, coming in and just monitoring that, I think will be almost impossible. And
one of the key guidelines that everybody shared from CDC and other places is to limit access to visitors, period, including parents. I don't want to say that parents couldn't come to the school, but sometimes we have parents that are walking kids in daily. And the advice is that we, obviously the more people that come in, the more chance there is for a problem. So the idea is limit that as much as possible to maintain the healthy environment. So I agree. I think we need to take all of our facility users and just kind of push them back a little ways and say, let's figure this out on our end first, make sure we feel comfortable, and then ensure that they can, as Josh said, follow the same requirements.
Right.
April, can you guys convey that in a proper way to the people that have been using facilities so they can be prepared to know?
We've been in communication with the church that uses West Jackson Middle, or regular, probably every 2 weeks with them.
Okay.
But beyond that, I think most of it would be rec department.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and honestly, the rec department is that's a piece that we're going to have to work with Mr. Sanders and really figure it out, because that since they have opened up the parks, then you've got the restrooms and you've got, some of the things that we really, it could easily turn into, something very difficult to manage. And I'm not an alarmist at all. And I don't think anybody on this board is, but I think we have to be cognizant that there's some level of liability that exists. And
Yeah.
so we've got to be able to ensure some level of sanitation and, kind of commit to that through a disinfecting strategy. And if that's violated, then we may be liable. So we've just got to figure out, granted, we fall under sovereign immunity and we're going to do everything we can, but this is just too unique that we can't take risk in not ensuring that we're following safety protocols. And so people coming and going is just not going to work. So they've even vendors and people who come work on our properties are going to have daily temperature checks and checklists. And there's a lot of, Mr. Clarsey, I'm sure you're having to do the same thing with your folks. So
I just had mine taken before I went on air, so.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, now how about the church that was meeting at Jackson County High School? Are they still, they're not?
No,
No,
ma'am.
the spring was their last. They moved on.
Yes.
Oh,
Yep.
okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, and this is going to be an extra expense for us with all the cleaning and sanitation that we're going to have to do. So we sure
It
can't
is. It is.
somebody else come in
Mhm.
and it be a additional.
Right.
I don't know that we could trust them to do it the way we know it needs to be done.
We can't take that risk. I think we have to take total responsibility for the cleanliness of our facilities. And that's one of the reasons we have to be in control of who accesses our buildings right now. And one of the benefits, we continue to look for silver linings, but one of the benefits that we can thank Josh for is he's taken advantage of this time to go ahead and get many of our key card access installed, the key cards on our doors. So that will help us as we go into the year controlling access to our buildings some, because we can change some keys and make sure that we are controlling who comes in and out of the buildings a little bit better.
And we're not having any trouble purchasing the cleaning supplies that we need now, hopefully.
They're not as abundant. We're making sure we're ordering everything now. We've got a really good supply right now that we ordered as soon as all this started. But we're got some more orders in now and making sure that if school starts back, we have everything we need.
Good.
But that is,
That's a real concern.
everybody dealing with those kinds of issues as well.
Yeah.
Our transportation department had a couple of years ago purchased these BioEsk machines that they use to spray and disinfect. And so Josh has purchased some of those as well. So we were a little ahead of the curve, but you're right, Ms. Wheeler, it's the actual supply of the chemicals that we need. And that, and as silly as it may sound, finding bulk hand sanitizer, that's difficult, those kinds of things. So we're working on all of that, and I think we're in a really good place. We're not destitute by any stretch. It's just you don't know how long that you're going to need to be able to prepare. So for how long you need to have a par stock. So that's.
I would say too that this emphasizes the importance of having partners with some of our vendors, long-term partners like Athens Janitorial, because having dealt with them for so long, you get a little more priority than the person that just walks in the door. At least we hope so.
Yes.
But that's very helpful to have people that are really our team members and our partners through this.
Yeah, watching out for us. Speaking of that, I think it's important that our board knows, and we've put it out there, but Northeast Georgia Medical Center donated 1,200 handmade masks. So we'll be able to hand all of our teachers and staff members a mask when they return. And actually, they're going to be returning next week just on an hour-and-a-half basis to work in their rooms and get things cleaned up for post-planning. And then on Tuesday, SK Innovations donated 2,000 of the high-quality masks for graduation ceremonies if we're able to get to that point, regardless of what kind of graduation. So SK Innovations provided us with enough masks for our graduation. So we're grateful. Again, as Ted said, some of those partnerships are really, really important. So We're grateful for that. And since I've mentioned graduation, if you don't mind, real quickly, I'll give you an update to what we know now. As you know, East Jackson High School is having a parade tonight. Begins at 7 o'clock at East Jackson, and they will have students lined up in their cars with their families, and they will start at East Jackson High School, and then they will parade over, and they're being led by our Sheriff's Department, and a thank you to our Sheriff's Department for helping us with this. They'll go to East High, and then students who went to Maysville and are graduating will parade on over to Maysville, and when they get to Maysville, they'll be recognized by teachers on the curb from Maysville, and the same for East Jackson and Benton and South Jackson. So we've got parades going on the east side, starting at East High and going out to the elementary schools. That's the way they've handled it. And at Jackson County High School, they're kind of doing it the inverse, and folks are coming into the high school, and all of the elementary will be at the parking lot at the high school, and Mr. Wester is serving Chick-fil-A, and they're social distancing, and they're staged along the entire corridor of the student parking lot, and students and their families will parade through on Friday from 6 to 7. So each high school is trying to do something in honoring those students on the actual day of their graduation. And as you may know, they put out a survey to families, because we know that we cannot do a full-scale graduation ceremony in June. That would require us to violate all of the CDC guidelines, and we're just not in a position to do that. You should know that Commerce will be doing their graduation ceremony tomorrow night. And Dr. Talbert they have 88 graduates, first of all. So that's a third of what one of our classes would be. And they've limited the tickets, and they've worked with the EMS department, and they are prepared, and they can do that because of the low number of graduates. So they're marking seats, and they're having people sit 6 feet apart, and they're honoring all the CDC guidelines, but they're able to do that. We couldn't do that, especially at Jackson County High School, because there's only one side for seating, and their seating is limited. East Jackson can't do it either, but they have a little bit more potential. So the high school principals asked if they could survey their parents, and they've surveyed parents to get feedback. They're both looking at two potentials. One is proceed in June, but do it more on a personalized basis and do it in the auditorium, and have 15 graduates every 15 minutes and use social distancing by lining kids outside, and then one family at a time coming through, receiving all the pomp and circumstance, and doing it in the auditorium. But you would never have all the kids there all at the same time, but everyone would be able to be recognized. The benefit of that approach is it's done in June. Students can bring as many family members as they want. The family members are socially distanced in the auditorium, and they get to see that student walk across the stage and get their diploma. And they'll have it decorated and, honor them that way. The second option would be to have it in July, on July 17th and 18th, in hopes that the pandemic has quelled enough that they can actually have the ceremony on at the high school stadium. They would still have to limit the number of tickets that they would issue, because we still have to honor some of the social distancing, I think, even in July, obviously, all of it if it's still in place. So, but that would be more of a traditional ceremony in July. Jackson County, because of their seating, has looked at the possibility. I don't think Jackson County can pull off a traditional, they have more graduates and less seating. So I don't think they can pull off a traditional, even in July. So Mr. Wester, asked about the possibility of, what if we do 3 mini ceremonies, like a 4, a 6, and an 8, and just do a third of the class, and stagger it. And so he and his team are taking the feedback from parents, and we're all meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning to try to make a final recommendation. My question for you, honestly, is I feel like because we have given parents voice, are you comfortable if the two high schools respond differently? I think that there may be a likelihood that Jackson County, so far on the feedback he had gotten, it was looking more like an auditorium graduation in June and giving every family their opportunity. And East High was looking more like they want to have theirs in July, and they would limit the number of people who would come. From a board perspective, are you comfortable with them having a different approach if it's based on the feedback from their parents? They all sent the same survey.
Absolutely. I don't have a problem with that at all.
Okay.
Me either. That's good. That sounds good.
Okay. Well, I just, with all due respect, anytime you ask for feedback and you get it, you're not ever going to make everybody happy. And so you potentially may have folks contacting you, but I wanted you to be aware of the process that they're using. And they have spent days and nights and countless hours trying to do the right thing with very, very restrictive parameters. And so Mr. Wester came up here yesterday and just sat down and he said, we have 4 high school administrators who have students who are graduating. So they are equally invested as we are in trying to do the best that they can for our kids, but they're just navigating unique waters. So thank you for that feedback. And when we meet in the morning, I feel the what we did the same for everybody was ask for their feedback. Now we should respond appropriately to their feedback and honor what they're requesting. And that may be different for each community. So that's how we'll proceed in the morning.
Did the survey say the auditorium would be 15 people at a time, 15 students at a time? Did it say that on the survey?
It said that they would stagger the times. And from a logistical point of view, that's what they have figured out, how many they feel like they can manage at a time, is every 15 minutes having about 15 graduates. And they would line up outside the auditorium, and then 1 or 2 families at a time would go across the stage, watch what's happening, and then be able to exit.
I didn't vote for that option, for the record, so.
You didn't?
I didn't.
Okay.
So I'm with the people on the east side. Oh, well.
All right. I think everybody's holding tight to wanting to be able to have a ceremony, and that's what we all prefer to be the case, for sure. I'll tell you though, that it's happening in different ways in different places, but there are many, many places, including colleges, that have just said, we're not having one this year, and that's the end of it. And so we're trying to do something. All right, that's a lot more update that wasn't on the agenda, but I appreciate your time, and it is so helpful to us to be able to share with you some of the things that we've been hard at work trying to solve. And of course, Todd hasn't been a part of this conversation a lot, and I don't see his face because I'm limited on my screen. I know he's still here, but Teaching and Learning has been working diligently to make sure that we are uber prepared if indeed we have to start remotely. And whether we start remotely or we find ourselves in a remote environment in the middle of the year, the fact that we are likely to have to be in a remote setting is pretty great. I think at some point, whether it be the beginning, the middle, or the end, we're likely to need some remote learning time. So we're preparing for that. All right. I'm sorry, Ms. Wheeler. I thank you for allowing us that update.
No, we needed that, so we appreciate it. All right, so are we ready now to vote on our recommendation to approve the GMP for the Empower College and Career Center? I'm assuming that means yes, we are ready to vote. Do I have a motion that we accept this recommendation?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All righty. Okay, so that motion carries. All right, so now then, is it correct we're going to go to the executive session? Now, what do we need to do that? I don't remember.
We've never done this before. And so I am going to click on breakout rooms. You've all been invited to a breakout room. And as soon as I click on breakout rooms, hopefully you will join that room. You won't need to close anything out. You'll just come back. So I'm going to.
Should we just sit here?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's a good thing.
All right, Todd?
Yes, ma'am. Did you open up the break?
Huh?
You open up the breakout room. You click down on the bottom breakout room.
Yes.
And then what is your on that small window that pops up? Does it say something about open rooms or start rooms, something to that
It
effect?
says create rooms, but I already created one.
This won't be hard. Go ahead and click on the create room and see if what you already have is there. Is it there?
Yes.
And in the room, does it have everybody that you want to go into that room already assigned?
Has more.
It has more.
Mhm.
All right, click on, I think it says assign. Do you see next to the room, do you see a button that says assign? What you should be able to do is click or unclick by people's names. Oh, you're going somewhere.
Yeah.
Watching me?
All right, so do we need to click join?
If just board members can join.
Okay, so we just need to click join now?
Mhm. Yes, ma'am.
Technically, everybody on here got that.
Yeah, we all got it, but we don't click on it.
Good thing you said that.